My father stood up at my graduation party, raised his glass, and looked directly past me. Not at me, past me. He turned to my younger sister, who had barbecue sauce on her thumb and hadn't cracked a textbook in a decade, and he said, in front of every person I loved, "I wish it was you holding that diploma. You are the only child who has ever truly made me proud." My mother nodded. My sister smiled like she'd been expecting it, and I set my napkin on the table, walked to the porch, and stood alone in the dark while my own graduation party continued without me. 6 years. 6 years of 12-hour night shifts, cold cafeteria sandwiches over textbooks, and paying every cent of tuition from my own paycheck. And that was the toast I got. Now here's what you need to understand before this story goes any further. My name is Darcy. I'm a registered nurse in the Shenandoah Valley. And what happened over the 3 months after that party, what an entire county witnessed with their own eyes, was something my family never saw coming. Because while my sister was taking credit for fixing my parents' porch, she didn't know the handyman had my number saved in his phone. While she was telling the church ladies I had abandoned my parents, she didn't know the pharmacist had been watching me pick up their prescriptions for 2 years, and while my father spent 34 years pretending he was ashamed of me, he didn't know I had found out his secret, the secret that explained everything. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about a cruel toast at a dinner table. This is a story about what happens when the daughter who pays every bill, fixes every problem, and saves every situation in silence finally stops whispering. And if you have ever been the one in your family who does everything and gets credit for nothing, I need you to watch this until the end. Because what happened at that health fair changed things. Not just for me, for every single person in that parking lot, including my father. Let me tell you something about being the invisible daughter. It doesn't happen all at once. Nobody sits down and decides to erase you. It's not dramatic like that. It's slow. It's quiet. It happens in small moments that each seem forgivable on their own. Until you add them all up, and then you see it clearly. A pattern so consistent, so perfectly designed to keep you small, that you almost have to admire how well it worked. 6 months before that graduation toast, I organized a surprise party for my mother's 58th birthday. I ordered a cake from Sullivan's Bakery, buttercream roses, $45. I drove 40 minutes after a 12-hour night shift to set up streamers and candles while Mom was at the thrift shop. I was arranging plates on the table when my phone buzzed. A photo from Brooke, Mom blowing out candles, at Brooke's kitchen table. Tyler had frosting on his nose. Brooke's text said, "Surprise Mom with an early birthday lunch. She loved it." I stood in my parents' kitchen holding a $45 cake that nobody was going to eat. I called Mom. "Oh, honey, I already celebrated with Brooke. She made my favorite chicken salad. Can we do yours another time?" We never did it another time. That cake sat in my refrigerator for a week. I ate one slice standing at the counter at 11 p.m. after a shift. Threw the rest out on a Tuesday. Now here's what I want you to ask yourself right now. Was that an accident? Did Brooke just happen to throw a birthday lunch the same week I'd planned a party? Or was this something else entirely? Because this was Brooke's pattern, and it took me years to name it. She didn't compete with me directly. She preempted me, showed up first, gave the gift first, made the call first. And when I arrived with my version, the slot was already taken, and I looked like the one who was late, like I hadn't tried hard enough, like I was always 20 minutes behind. But here's where it stopped being just family politics and started being something I cannot forgive. In September, 3 months after that graduation toast, I stopped by the pharmacy to pick up Mom's blood pressure medication, something I had been doing quietly every single month for 2 years. The pharmacist, Doug, frowned at his screen. "Darcy, your mom's insurance premiums haven't been paid in 2 months. If they lapse, refills go to full price." 2 months. Brooke Sy, who had proudly taken over managing my parents' finances, hadn't paid the health insurance. I drove to the county office during my lunch break and paid the back premiums myself. $412. Out of my own pocket. No announcement, no text to Mom saying what I'd done. Because if I told her, it would force a confrontation I wasn't ready for yet. 1 week later, I found out the porch railing at my parents' house was splitting. Dangerous. Mom walked out every morning to check her bird feeders, leaning on that railing. I waited 2 weeks for Brooke's contractor. Nobody came, so I called Russ Decker, a handyman I trusted, and told him to fix it and send the bill to me. $800, new posts, reinforced brackets, fresh stain. And I told Russ one more thing. Don't mention I called, please. That instruction, those 5 words, "Don't mention I called," are going to matter more than you know before this story is over. Because 3 weeks later, I sat down to Sunday dinner at my parents' house and watched my mother beam with pride as she told the table what a wonderful daughter Brooke was for finding that contractor. I ran my hand along the smooth new wood on the way in, said nothing, smiled, and sat down. $800 for a railing my sister got thanked for. But here's the thing that finally broke me, and it didn't happen at the dinner table. It happened under fluorescent pharmacy lights, between the allergy medication and the blood glucose monitors, when Caroline Connolly pulled me aside and told me what my sister had said at the church ladies group. There are moments in life when a single piece of information rearranges everything. Not just the present, not just the future, but the past. Every memory you have suddenly shifts 2 inches to the left, and you see it differently. All of it. At once. That moment came for me on a Tuesday morning in September, sitting in the living room of a 74-year-old man named Harold Perkins. And it started with something that seemed like nothing. A casual sentence from an old man who had known my father his entire life. I had been visiting Mr. Perkins every Tuesday for 3 years, not because the hospital asked me to, because he was 74, lived alone since his wife passed, had type 2 diabetes, and the nearest endocrinologist was 90 minutes away. So every Tuesday after my shift, I drove to his house, wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his arm, checked his glucose, and stayed for sweet tea. That Tuesday in mid-September, he was staring at the wall where his wife's cross-stitch still hung, and he said something that stopped me cold. Your daddy used to come sit at my kitchen table, had anatomy flashcards spread out everywhere, bones of the hand, muscles of the back. He'd quiz himself for hours. I looked at him. Anatomy? Mr. Perkins caught himself. His eyes shifted the way a person's eyes shift when they realize they've opened a door that was supposed to stay shut. Oh, that was nothing. Ancient history. He changed the subject to his tomatoes, but I couldn't let it go. Anatomy flashcards. My father. A kitchen table. 1991. My father. The man who had said, "You think wiping bottoms for a living makes you better than us?" when I enrolled in nursing school. The man who changed the channel every time a nurse appeared on television. The man who stayed in the garage the entire time my colleague Jenna waited in the driveway. That man had been sitting at a neighbor's table studying anatomy. I went back the next day, brought Mr. Perkins his blood pressure medication, poured him a glass of sweet tea, sat down across from him, and asked him directly, "Mr. Perkins, was my father trying to go to nursing school?" He set down his glass, looked at his hands, and then he told me everything. Earl Ashworth applied to the nursing program at Valley Community College in 1991. He was 28 years old. His inspiration was his grandmother, my great-grandmother, Mabel Ashworth, who had served as a practical nurse with the Army during the Korean War. Earl adored her. She died when he was 16, and he carried her memory like a compass for the rest of his life. He wanted to be like her, so he studied for 5 months, anatomy, biology, basic chemistry. He took the entrance exam at Mr. Perkins's kitchen table because he didn't want my mother to know until he got in. He was waitlisted, then rejected. The letter came on a Thursday. 2 months later, my mother told him she was pregnant with me. He took the factory job the following Monday, and never spoke of it again. Mr. Perkins looked at me across that kitchen table. Quiet as a prayer, he said, "He was going to be a nurse, honey. Just like you. I want you to stop for just 1 second, because I need you to feel what I felt in that moment." My father had spent 34 years watching me live the life that rejection letter took from him. Every textbook I carried home, every clinical rotation I described at the dinner table, every time someone in town called me Nurse Darcy, he wasn't looking at his daughter. He was looking at the 28-year-old version of himself who sat at this same man's kitchen table with flashcards and believed, genuinely believed, that he could be something more, and was told he wasn't good enough. I was the mirror he couldn't face, and rather than tell me, rather than say, "Darcy, you are living my dream and I am so proud of you," he punished me for it, for 33 years. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and my jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. That night I went through old family photos, found one I'd never really studied before. Earl, at maybe 23, sitting at a table with books open around him, a pencil in his hand. I had always assumed he was filling out paperwork for the factory. Now I saw it clearly. A young man studying. The same focused crease between his eyes that I get when I'm reading a patient's chart. My father and I had been the same person, separated by 1 rejection letter and 34 years of silence. And I made a decision sitting on my bedroom floor with that photograph in my hands. I would not use this as a weapon. Telling my father I knew in the middle of an argument would be like detonating something that could never be rebuilt. I wasn't interested in destruction. but I was finished with silence. Because here is what I understood for the first time, with complete clarity, sitting on that floor. My father projected his failure onto me. My sister projected her insecurity onto me. My mother projected her regret onto me. None of it was ever about me. I was just the surface they bounced their unfinished business off of. And for 33 years, I had stood perfectly still and absorbed every single bit of it. There is a particular kind of strength that grows in people who have been overlooked for too long. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make speeches or demand apologies. It just quietly begins building something so real, so visible, so undeniably theirs, that no one can preempt it. No one can show up the day before and take credit. No one can text a photo of it from their kitchen table. That's what the health fair became for me. Not revenge, not a performance, a foundation. Dr. Margaret Patterson pulled me into her office 8 weeks before October and offered me something I hadn't expected. She wanted me to lead the entire county health fair. 15 volunteer nurses, 6 clinic stations, free blood pressure, glucose, cholesterol, vision, and dental screenings for every person in the Shenandoah Valley, a $3,000 hospital budget, a $2,000 county wellness grant, a photographer and reporter from the Shenandoah Valley Herald. She said, "I want you to build something this community will remember." And for the first time in longer than I could measure, I was building something that belonged entirely to me. The work was brutal. 60 hours a week between night shifts and fair coordination. I ate standing up. I slept in 5-hour blocks. I made phone calls, ordered latex gloves, designed flyers, confirmed volunteers, arranged donated equipment from Augusta Health, 2 automatic blood pressure monitors, a hemoglobin A1C testing kit, 50 packs of Lancets. Every task felt like laying a brick, not for my family, for the county, for Mr. Perkins, who needed weekly glucose checks because the specialist was 90 minutes away, for Mrs. Connolly in room 214, who couldn't sleep because the dark scared her and just needed someone to stay, for every patient whose name I knew, whose fear I had sat with at 3 a.m. under fluorescent lights while my family ate pot roast 10 minutes away. And then Brooke called. "Hey Dar, quick favor, can you help cover Kyle's car insurance this month? He got laid off again." $400, on top of the $412 I'd already paid for Mom's health insurance, on top of the $800 porch repair, on top of 2 years of monthly prescriptions. I sent the money through Zelle in 30 seconds. Because that's what I do. I fix things. I cover bills. I show up with solutions while other people show up with pot roast. But 2 days later, I stopped by the pharmacy again, and Doug pulled me aside with that same frown I was beginning to dread. Someone had called the insurance company and changed the primary care physician on my mother's records to a doctor in Staunton that Mom had never visited. I fixed it. 45 minutes on hold during my lunch break. Reversed the change. Confirmed Mom's original doctor. When I asked Mom about it, she said the same 3 words she always said. "Brooke handles that." A phrase that was starting to sound less like delegation and more like a door I wasn't supposed to open. The confrontation with Brooke didn't happen at a dinner table. It didn't happen at our parents' house. It happened in a salon parking lot on a Wednesday afternoon, Brooke sitting in her minivan eating yogurt with the door open. I walked up calm. The way you walk into a patient's room when you already know the diagnosis and you need the patient to hear it clearly. "Brooke, why did you tell the church group that I refused to help with Mom and Dad's medical bills?" Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" She put the yogurt on the dashboard. "I didn't say you refused. I said you weren't around. You told them I was too busy to help. Caroline Connolly was sitting right there. Well, you are busy. You're always busy. I want you to notice something." She didn't deny it, she reframed it. There is a difference between someone who lies and gets caught and feels shame, and someone who lies so consistently that the lie has become their truth. Brooke genuinely believed the story she was telling, not because the facts supported it, but because she needed it to be true. So I laid out the facts quietly, one by one. The insurance premiums, the porch, Kyle's car payment, the prescriptions, the unauthorized doctor change I'd spent 45 minutes reversing on my lunch break. Her jaw tightened, and then, just for a second, it wasn't hard anymore. Her voice cracked. "You got everything, Darcy. The brains, the grades, the job everyone talks about. All I had was being here, being the one who shows up, and now you want credit for that too?" I looked at my little sister, 28 years old, yogurt on her scrubs, 2 car seats visible through the minivan window. Her pain was real. I understood that completely. What she did with that pain, the lying, the preempting, the church ladies, the contractor who never came, that was not okay. But the fear underneath it was real. She was terrified that if our parents truly saw me, they would stop seeing her. "I don't want credit, Brooke," I said. "I just want you to stop lying." She drove away, and I stood in that parking lot and looked at the sky for a long moment. 4 days. The health fair was 4 days away. I had one last conversation to attempt with my father before it arrived. I drove to my parents' house, put Mom's medications on the counter, stacked the groceries I'd brought, found Earl in the living room watching a fishing show with the volume low. I sat on the arm of the couch. "Dad, I'd really love for you and Mom to come to the health fair next Saturday. Mom's blood pressure has been high. We'll have a screening station." He didn't look away from the television. "I don't need a nurse telling me what's wrong with me." The word nurse, clipped, like biting it off before it could grow. "It's not just for you, Dad. It's for the whole community. Brooke's having a cookout that weekend." I looked at the side of his face, the jaw that was identical to mine, the stubborn refusal to turn. "I understand," I said, and I meant it, more than he knew. I kissed Mom on the cheek, walked to my car, and drove home. 20 minutes on Route 9, windows down, October air carrying the smell of hay and wood smoke. I didn't cry, not because I was being brave, because I had already grieved this. The fantasy of my father watching his daughter do the thing he was rejected from doing 35 years ago, that fantasy had died at a graduation party in June. I was just finally putting it in the ground. I arrived at the hospital parking lot at 6 a.m. October air, sharp and clean, the kind that makes the Blue Ridge Mountains look like they were painted overnight. I directed the tent setup myself. 6 white canopies in a row, folding tables, hand sanitizer dispensers, a banner across the entrance that read, "County Memorial Community Health Fair, free screenings, no family drama, no graduation toast, no pot roast politics, just work." The kind I had been doing for 8 years under fluorescent lights at 3 a.m., finally happening in daylight where everyone could see it. By 9 a.m., the lot was filling, farmers in boots, retired teachers in windbreakers, young mothers pushing strollers, elderly men in their Sunday flannel, 230 people who needed someone to show up for them, and I was there. I was always there. At 10:15, I looked up from a conversation with the Herald reporter, and I saw them walking through the entrance. My mother, church cardigan, reading glasses on a chain, my father, good flannel, hands in his pockets, Brooke and Kyle trailing behind, Madison holding Brooke's hand, Tyler on Kyle's hip. They came, not because they chose the health fair over the cookout. Kyle had forgotten to buy the ribs. Brooke had suggested going out to eat instead, and my mother had looked at the postcard on the refrigerator and said, "The health fair is right there, and I want my blood pressure checked." Fate, luck, or the kind of cosmic timing that only happens in real life. I didn't run to them, didn't wave, didn't perform. I adjusted the clipboard in my hand, walked over, and said, "Welcome. Blood pressure station is right over there." Professional, steady, like any nurse greeting any patient. I was helping an elderly man named Gerald through the glucose screening when I saw my mother sitting at Jenna's station, arm extended, blood pressure cuff inflating, 152/94. I pulled up a chair beside her, explained the numbers, talked about sodium, hydration, follow-up appointments. Clinical, gentle, thorough. Mom looked at me, really looked, with something I hadn't seen from her in a very long time. Not obligation, not comparison, something closer to wonder. "You really know this stuff, don't you?" she said, and before I could answer, the microphone crackled. Dr. Patterson stepped to the portable stage near the entrance. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to County Memorial's 3rd Annual Community Health Fair." Applause. "I want to take a moment to recognize the person who made today possible." She turned toward the crowd. "Darcy Ashworth designed this fair from scratch. She recruited 15 volunteer nurses from 3 counties. She secured donated equipment. She coordinated 6 clinic stations. She did all of this while working full-time night shifts, the same 12-hour shifts she has been working for 8 years to serve this community." More applause. I stood near the glucose station with my clipboard and felt 230 pairs of eyes settle on me, and then Dr. Patterson said something I was not expecting. "Darcy is the nurse who drives to Harold Perkins's house every Tuesday to check his blood sugar. She organized free flu shots at the senior center last winter. She does these things not for recognition, but because this is simply who she is." She opened the floor, and the county spoke. Caroline Connolly stepped forward first. "My mother has been in and out of the hospital for 3 years. Darcy sat with her through 3 nights when she couldn't breathe. She never charged for those extra hours. She just stayed." Mr. Perkins raised his hand from his wheelchair near the tent entrance, his grandson Russ standing behind him. "This girl picks up my medication every month, has for 3 years. Rain, snow, 100-degree days. She never missed once. Tanya Brooks, the nursing student I had mentored through her clinicals, stood up from a folding chair, voice breaking. Darcy taught me that being a nurse isn't just a job. It's a promise. She's the reason I didn't quit when I failed my first clinical exam. She sat with me in a parking lot for an hour and told me that failing a test doesn't make you a failure. One by one. Like a thread being pulled from a sleeve. People who didn't know each other. People who had no reason to coordinate. Each one holding a fragment of the same truth. The same nurse. The same neighbor. The same quiet woman who showed up and stayed and never once asked for anything in return. I stood there with my clipboard and my stethoscope. And said nothing. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father's jaw was working, that muscle pulsing the way it does when a man is fighting something he can't name out loud. And Brooke was sitting in a folding chair with Tyler on her lap, and her face had gone tight as a closed fist. She leaned over to Kyle and whispered, "This is all for show." But she whispered it loud enough for the people beside her to hear, and they looked at her. The crowd had just gone quiet between speakers, and Brooke couldn't hold it in. She stood up. Tyler slid off her lap onto the chair, and her voice cut through the October air like a car horn in a church. "This is ridiculous." 230 heads turned. "You all act like she's some kind of saint." She pointed directly at me. "She doesn't even call Mom." The silence that followed was total. No wind, no children playing, no distant traffic. Just 230 people staring at my sister standing in the middle of a community health fair, accusing me of neglect. Caroline Connolly spoke first. "Darcy calls the hospital pharmacy every week to check on your mother's prescriptions. I've been at the counter when she does it." Doug the pharmacist looked up from the medication information table. "I see Darcy pick up your parents' medications every single month. She's been doing it for 2 years. And then Russ Decker, standing behind Mr. Perkins's wheelchair, furrowed his brow. "Wait, Darcy's the one who called me to fix your parents' porch. She paid me $800 and told me not to mention it." My mother turned slowly to look at Russ. "You?" "Yes, ma'am. She called in September." One by one, the pharmacist, the handyman, the patient's daughter, the nursing student. People who had never spoken to each other in their lives, each one holding a piece of the same puzzle that my sister had spent months carefully burying under pot roast and sympathy and whispered lies at the church ladies' group. Brooke's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Kyle had taken 2 steps back from her, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. Nobody was coming to rescue her story. The story she had built for months was collapsing, one witness at a time. My father stepped forward. His face was red, not anger red, the red of a man who has been standing too close to a fire he lit himself. Brooke was always right there. She was the one I could see. I looked at my father, 62 years old, rough hands, stubborn jaw, a man who had sat at a neighbor's kitchen table 35 years ago with anatomy flashcards and a dream, and been told no. I kept my voice level. "I know, Dad. You stood at my graduation party and told a room full of people that you wished my diploma belonged to someone else." I paused. "In front of my friends, my colleagues, the people who drove 3 hours to celebrate something I worked 6 years to earn." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I spoke the way I speak to a patient's family when the news isn't good. Clear, calm, true. "I don't need you to be proud of me, Dad. I needed you to see me. And you chose not to." Earl's mouth worked. No words came. I turned away from my family, and I turned toward the county. 230 people who had driven out on a Saturday morning not for drama, but for free blood pressure checks and glucose screenings and someone to take care of them. "Thank you all for coming today," I said, my voice steady. "This fair exists because I believe every person in this county deserves to be seen." I looked out at the crowd, at Mr. Perkins in his wheelchair, at Caroline Connolly wiping her eyes, at Tanya Brooks who almost quit nursing because of one failed exam. Not for their degrees, not for whether they live 10 minutes away or 20, for who they are. I looked at my father one final time. I became a nurse because I wanted to take care of people. I didn't know it would start with the people who never thought I could. Then Dr. Patterson stepped back to the microphone. "One more announcement. The hospital board has created a new full-time position, Nurse Community Liaison. After reviewing applications and community impact, they have offered the position to Darcy Ashworth." The applause hit like a wave. Mr. Perkins clapped from his wheelchair. Jenna was wiping her eyes at the blood pressure station. Tanya Brooks was crying openly. I nodded, didn't bow, didn't make a speech, just nodded, the way you acknowledge something that has been a long time coming. The fair ended at 4 p.m. Volunteers broke down the tents. Families drifted home with pamphlets and screening results. I was folding the last table when I heard footsteps behind me. Earl picked up a folding chair, then another. He stacked them on the cart without speaking. We worked side by side for 10 minutes in silence, the longest we had been near each other without a television between us since I was in high school. Finally he stopped, rested his hands on the back of a chair. Your great-grandmother, Mabel, she was an army nurse in Korea. He stopped, started again. I was going to be like her. Like you. Why didn't you ever tell me, Dad? His knuckles went white on the chair back. Because every time I saw your textbooks, I remembered the letter that told me I wasn't good enough. There it was. 34 years of silence broken over a stack of folding chairs in an empty parking lot. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't promising to change. He was telling the truth for the first time. And sometimes telling the truth for the first time is the bravest thing a person can do. I'm not going to stop being a nurse, Dad. I know. A pause. And I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with all of this yet. A longer pause. But I see you now, Darcy. I should have seen you a long time ago. He picked up another chair and kept stacking. A month later, I started the liaison position. Regular hours, no more night shifts. I drove through the valley visiting homebound patients. Mr. Perkins on Tuesdays, Mrs. Connolly on Thursdays. I still picked up Mom's medications from Doug. Still brought groceries every other week. But something had shifted. Mom started calling to say thank you, a phrase she had never offered me before. Dad didn't praise me. That wasn't coming anytime soon. Maybe never. But he stopped criticizing, and he put my BSN graduation photo on the mantel shelf between Madison's kindergarten picture and Tyler's baptism portrait. And Brooke and I sat in her minivan one Sunday after church, engine off, kids sleeping in the back car seats. I was scared, she said, that if they saw you, they'd stop seeing me. There's room for both of us, Brooke. But not if you keep lying. She picked at a thread on the steering wheel. I know. The family wasn't healed. Healing takes years, if it comes at all. But we had stopped pretending. And sometimes, stopping the lie is the first honest thing a family does in decades. Here's what I want you to take with you today. The people who overlook you do not get to define your worth. Being invisible is not the same as being absent. An absent person doesn't show up. An invisible person shows up every single time, pays the bills, fixes the porch, covers the insurance, drives 40 minutes with a birthday cake, and nobody writes it down. Until one day, the whole county does. A toast made to the wrong daughter, a porch fixed in silence, a $45 cake nobody ate, a diploma nobody clapped for until 230 people did. If you know someone who has been invisible for too long, share this story with them today. And if you have ever been the one who shows up and stays and never gets the credit, drop the word invisible in the comments right now, because I read every single one. If this story moved you, subscribe to Betrayed Blood, because every week we tell the stories that families try to keep quiet, and we tell them loudly.